Hey, welcome back to Everyday Economics, the podcast that helps you learn about the economic world happening around you every day. I'm your host, Chris Krug, president of 501c3 nonprofit, nonpartisan Franklin News Foundation. Everyday Economics is a production of America's Talking Network. You can check out all of our great podcasts at americastalking.com. We are recording this episode on Monday, May 15th. And joining me, as always, Dr. Orphe Divounguy. He's a PhD economist. Dr. O, this is a conversation that you and I have been wanting to have for a while. We've talked about it, and I think it kind of makes sense with the U.S. policy change from Title 42 to Title 8 with regard to immigration, the details of which we can get into or save for a later time. We wanted to talk about the economics of immigration. And first of all, the politicizing immigration, it's like the thing right now. We're a nation of immigrants, right? My father's family settled in the North, fought in the Civil War for the North. My mother's family came to the United States, almost exclusively from Lithuania. They didn't come until just about 1900. So the Irish and the Germans in my family came, in the 1830s. And then the Lithuanians in my family started coming to the country in late 1800s.
Let's add another stat here. The foreign-born population has grown rapidly in recent decades, rising from less than 5% of the U.S. population in 1970 to 13% in 2013. And that number has increased since a lot. I'm here from another country and just enjoying this beautiful life that America can afford.
We would like to welcome you in as a citizen. In my view, you're somebody that would absolutely benefit these United States. And we'd love to have you and your family.
But
here.
You know what? Let's actually explain that. Let's explain to our audience why immigration is so key to the U.S. economy.
Let's get into the economic side of it. So, the United States is aging. There's no doubt about that. And with more college-educated women, families are starting later, and in some cases, not at all, which is kind of an interesting factor, not just here. Years ago, when I was traveling in South America, I was hearing this from people in Brazil and in Chile, where it was actually really a significant problem that the population was aging. Same deal in Japan. Same deal, frankly, in Korea. So what's happening here in the United States is not unique. In Italy, they're giving away homes for literally giving away the home because they are not having children.
The implications are unbelievable. Look, just people. We have a people problem, right? It's fascinating that the same people who complain about, we talk about out-migration and say, hey, you have people leaving one state to go to another. It's the demise of the state that's losing people. Don't realize that, and by the way, to the benefit of the state that's gaining people, don't realize that having people come in this country works the same way. That the more people we have, the better off we are. It helps to stimulate the economy. It's potential demand. It's also supply, which grows economic output and improves living standards. I think a lot of people, the misconception is that immigrants compete with natives and thus may have a negative impact on wages of native workers. And that's just been debunked. It's absolutely nonsense. In fact, the reality is, let me just give you a very simple and clear example. Even for low-skilled workers, by the way, I'm not just talking about high-skilled Albert Einstein coming to this country and Elon Musk. I'm not talking about these super productive, smart scientists and entrepreneurs. I'm talking about even low-skilled cleaners coming into this country and landscapers coming into this country. The reality is that it used to be that women used to spend more time doing household work than men. As a result of that, fewer women actually went ahead and got into the labor force, went to earn a wage, right? And the gender gap used to be massive back in the day. But look, there was an increase in the technology that, the microwave, all those things that helped dishwashers and all that. But there's also the fact that immigrant women, low-skilled immigrant women that came into this country started providing household services that actually also helped to free American women from the burden of doing household work. And so over time, we saw a massive increase in female labor force participation and a decrease in the female gender gap, in the male-female gender gap, right? And so Like we see these things and immigrants contributed to that, right? We see the surge in college completion of American workers and the returns to education. Part of that is because we had people in this country to take the time to do the work that we didn't want to do. Let's be honest. Okay. The work that we didn't want to do. Today, you have people mowing your lawn. And if you talk to most business owners, and they'll tell you, we're struggling with finding service sector workers. We have supply shortages. It's hurting our businesses. Well, look, there's an easy source of workers to alleviate that problem. There's a ton of young migrants that are willing to do those jobs that Americans simply don't want to do anymore. We have a ton of service sector inflation with wage growth still at a level that's not sustainable with the Fed's 2% inflation target. And yes, if we had that inflow of immigrants, that might actually help to alleviate some of these shortages. And by the way, when those workers come in, it makes the rest of us more productive. Anyway, that's the impact of immigration on the labor market, on the U.S. economy as a whole.
I think where this is bumpy is frankly in the how. Here in Chicago, there have been hundreds of migrants who have been bussed from the southern border. There's a pretty big fight going on, specifically on the south side, where the amenities that are being offered to the migrants are frankly enhanced, more specific and more intentional than the opportunities there are for people who are homeless here already, who are, indigent, here already. And the economics of that, that's where I think, most Americans in this moment are trying to make sense of the cost of this, because when you start to see these numbers, so this is from a story from WLS television from this past week. And I'm quoting from the story. The city has officially declared a state of emergency, right? That's been ongoing, right? Chicago's taken in more than 8,000 migrants since August. More than 200 a day have flooded to the city. So they're taking care of these people who are unable to take care of themselves. The cost of that, the burden of the expense of that, I think is really taking the forefront. We can have this conversation about immigration and whether it's a good thing for the United States. Obviously, economically, I think it is. We need more workers. We need more people who are willing to work. Jobs are not being taken away from anybody. There's been help wanted signs everywhere.
That's right. Ton of excess job openings. That's right.
But the way that this is occurring and the cost that's being borne by American taxpayers right now to make the Biden plan, and I'm giving him credit and saying that this is a plan, that there's intentionality here, right? That's what's vexing. Could you make sense of that? It's a big ask.
Look, I remember, as a kid, whenever my parents had guests over, they always wanted to give them the absolute best. That was just kind of the thing, like you have a guest over, you treat your guest like a member of the family, if not better. I think that's what's happening. It might be a little bit short-term thinking because the economic gains outweigh the cost. That's the reality. Now, of course, there is a bit of a mess, and the mess comes from the fact that our laws are antiquated. The mess that we are in today is because we have these really bad laws in the books. And so fixing the laws is, I think, where we need to go with this conversation. I think that our elected officials, Congress, needs to legislate and fix broken laws that are in the books. What do we think that a wall at the border does? What do we think that tough immigration policies actually do? I'll tell you what they do. Raising the barrier to entry actually causes people who come here to stay here under any circumstance, because they understand that it becomes even more difficult to return. So once they come in, they end up staying, even if the labor market had cooled, and even if they were not in a position to take care of themselves, they end up coming in and being forced to stay because they've paid a high cost to come here. And the barrier to entry is so high that it's impossible for them to return to their home country, either permanently or just to visit family, because they know it's going to be impossible to return. It will cause the stock of immigrants in the United States to increase even faster because they'll end up staying, even if they don't have the job, et cetera, et cetera. And so we need to change the laws. We need to understand, we need Congress to spend a little bit of time learning about the economics of immigration and to legislate and fix these broken laws so that we can have the most productive migrants in a thriving economy.
I don't know that we can do this subject justice in one episode. The United States couldn't fix immigration over the last 100 years. I don't think you and I are going to be able to fix it in 10 minutes or less. For Orphe Divounguy, this has been Chris Krug. Subscribe to Everyday Economics and dozens of other quality podcasts at americastalking.com.